Yo, what's going on, E7 fam? Pat here, back to talk about the Awakened Potential update because I haven't got to over the last couple of days, as well as discuss this morning's announcement over the cancellation of the feature and the compensation that will be coming with it. Kind of want to give you my 2 cents since, I've been out of town traveling for the last couple of days. So, yeah, some of you guys have asked me what my opinions are on the system, so here we go. For those of you who have kind of missed it, been living under a rock, or just have been avoiding this drama dumpster fire altogether, let's quickly go over the system. The Awakened Potential system is, in my opinion, pretty good in theory. It is supposed to help older characters that could need a little bit of love, are not exactly in the greatest spot in the 5th year of Epic 7. So the examples that they gave were Crow, Ravi, Alencia, and Closer Charles. I think we can all agree that these characters have definitely seen better days, and, most of them are not really meta. You still have some Closer Charles holdouts for Cleave. Crow gets used in Guild War offense every once in a while, but, Alencia, her play rate has kind of plummeted since Apocalypse Ravi is definitely on the downswing, and then Red Ravi is, played almost nowhere outside of very oddly specific draft scenarios. And so you can see here in this paragraph, they've kind of outlined what the goal was supposed to be here, right? A major contributing factor to the imbalance stems from the allocation of stats dependent on the hero's constellation. In several cases, these base stat allocations hinder certain heroes from realizing their full potential in their roles. This is something that I have talked about a lot here on the channel. Famously, I love to hate on the Thief plus Scorpio Zodiac sign combination. That combination is so poor in terms of defense stat value that no matter what, that character is basically dead on arrival if it has that stat allocation, unless it is a dodge character. It is pretty bad. So I'm glad that they are acknowledging that certain Zodiac symbols, the combination just really doesn't work with the character. It is a system that they developed 5 years ago. It definitely has some challenges because we already know kind of most of the constellations, the Zodiac values for other classes and combinations that haven't come out. For example, Red loves to talk about the fact that if we ever get a 5-star Aquarius Thief, it's going to be absurd because the stat values are ridiculous. And then obviously I've also complained about the swap between the 4 and 5-star Aries stat line. So there's definitely some issues with the Zodiac signs in this game, and it does contribute to the viability of certain characters. I mean, you only need to look at the speed stat. If, for example, Naqual Monk was 10 speed faster because she was on a different Zodiac sign, we'd be looking at a very different picture with that actual character. Moving on to what they're saying. Moreover, there are constraints regarding the adjustment of base stats for heroes who have already been released. Additionally, the adjustments we can make to these attributes are limited for heroes who already possess exclusive equipment or 5-star Moonlight heroes, as the latter cannot receive exclusive equipment. Implementing sweeping changes to the Constellation system might inadvertently impact heroes that shouldn't be within the scope of our balancing efforts, leading to complications and making it challenging to overhaul the system. Yes, this is all, in my opinion, very, very good. This is a good idea. It really shores up some of the problems in terms of design and balance for Epic 7. And when I first read this, I was pretty positive about it. The problem with this system is its implementation, and it is, as the saying goes, not very cash money. Or in this case, I guess you could say it kind of was cash money, because they decided to take a page out of the Luluka Summer event and tie the bonuses you get from this new system, using Crow here as the example, based on the imprint level of the character. Crow is a day 1 character, right? So somebody like me who's a veteran who's been playing for 5 years, I have extra Crow imprints. I'm not like a big spender, but I've been here for a while, so I have the ability to memory imprint this. The thing is, a good chunk of my audience, you guys have been playing for a year or less, maybe 2 years or less, so you probably don't have this. And that means that if there's a potential really good buff here, like lock behind imprints, that's potentially kind of bad. Yes, they were going to introduce a way for us to get imprints, but I don't think it was really in the best amount of time frame. Like, you'd only get one every month, which meant that if Crow, for example, had something that was really insane on the SS imprint here, you could see as it says imprint increases summon Siegfried's bear strength by 10%. Nice to have, but nothing ridiculous. If this was like double Siegfried's damage, or like you start with like a 5-turn undispellable defense buff, something absurd, that would be awful, because it would take you guys like 4 to 5 months of farming just to get this, and in that time, a new set of Awakened Potential candidates would have released. That is kind of like not super great, but obviously what really rattled everybody is that when you get towards the policy and direction of this thing, we plan to regularly implement Awakened Potential for existing heroes and newly added Covenant heroes. So, for example, Fumir, who is supposedly coming in the next 2 to 3 weeks, as well as limited heroes, will have the Awakened Potential feature upon their release. That's kind of rough. They also go on here to talk about the fact that the Awakened Potential update will essentially flip-flop with our balance adjustment preview, so you would get 4 Awakened Potential update characters, and then 8 weeks later you would get a balance adjustment preview, and then you would get 4 characters, and so on and so forth. So like, it's basically replacing some of our balance adjustment previews. It's still basically a buff. It's just sometimes it would be this system versus the old system of how they would buff stuff. So yeah, once you start making imprints be a mandatory thing for some of this stuff, and you tie it to new characters and limited characters, it starts to make it seem like you need to have multiple copies of every character in order to actually play the game. And even though Epic 7 has a reputation of being very free-to-play friendly, very new player friendly, and I still think it is, it's less so now than it has been in the past, but it's still, you can kind of hang on there, I feel like, as a free-to-play player and a light spender, which is pretty good. Just knowing that it's going to be having to have dupes is just really not like a good feeling, like, at all. It just screams pay to win, especially in a PvP based gacha game. So that's what had everybody up in arms. And you can see that they changed it a little bit yesterday. When I got home, I was exhausted, but I did get to see this message. This was them basically backpedaling on the biggest issue that most people had, which is that it was only going to be on older characters. Some people were okay with that. Making it on new characters as they're released just raises a whole bunch of red flags. We already talked about the pay-to-win aspects. There's also the fact that certain abilities would be locked behind the paywall. Characters are basically being released new, unfinished, with some of the abilities of the kit locked away. So they kind of backpedaled on this right here, right? And that was good for a lot of people. I feel like this was the biggest complaint, and it was definitely a pretty good victory, I feel like, for the community, because if you've been watching everything over the last couple of days, we've had review bombing, protests in Korea, we've had a number of content creators that I respect putting out videos sounding the alarm on everything. It's kind of been like a big unification of all the servers, all of the communities in Epic 7 pushing back against this thing. So after that unification, the only question left is, how do we feel about the imprint system? Because right now, the characters that are out, Crow, Ravi, Alencia, Closer Charles, those announced ones, I personally have imprints for those characters. But what if I don't have imprints for the next 4 characters? Am I going to be able to farm them in a comfortable enough time span where I can stay relevant if they're good? Am I going to have to spend a ton of money on imprints in order to, again, kind of stay relevant? And if I'm having these doubts, then how do new players feel about the system? How does my audience feel about this system? I don't potentially think it's very good for them. And that was the doubt that I still had going to bed last night. But that obviously was put away this morning with the announcement that the Awakened Potential update has been canceled. And it came with this video announcement, which I will play a small portion of for you.
계승자님들께 심려를 끼쳐드린 점 진심으로 사과의 말씀드립니다.
As you can see, they apologize and the man bows, which to me is very profound. That shows that they know they made a very serious mistake. And you can see that they're acknowledging the pushback, that unification that I talked about of the community. They can see that we, again, are trying to save the game that we all know and love.
불안감을 안겨드리게 되어 죄송합니다. 이번 안내 사항으로 인해 오랜 시간 에픽7을 사랑해 주신 계승자님들께 큰 배신감과 상처를 드린 것 같아 책임자로서 크게 반성하고 있습니다. 이 부분은 어떠한
We
변명도
have
필요하지
no
않은 것
excuses
같습니다.
for this. Again, something
결론적으로
to me that
말씀드리면
is
에픽
very
7은 잠재력 특성
profound.
업데이트를 처리하고 지금 이 시간부로 모든 스펙을 전면 폐기하도록 하겠습니다.
So, again, they're acknowledging the pushback on it, and they recognize that they made a mistake. And so they're scrapping the whole system. And as a result, we're going to be getting some compensation here in the form of a 5-star Covenant Hero Selector, as well as 20 leaves. They're also going to obviously scrap the whole system and the accompanying Spirit Altar Epic Hell difficulty stage, as well as all of the potential blossoms, memory shards, and stuff that we're going to go with it. So, that's kind of it in a nutshell. That is the Awakened potential saga, basically. If this was like an anime, this arc is coming to a close, so to speak. But that said, I still think the initial idea behind this thing wasn't bad. I just think that it was executed absolutely terribly. Going back to that initial paragraph, a major contributing factor to this imbalance stems from the allocation of stats dependent on the hero's constellation. I applaud them for recognizing a flaw in the system and something that is making it difficult for them as designers to do their work. And I applaud the strength of them trying to do something about it and make great strides and change the game. I just think that this was probably the worst possible implementation for it. But make no mistake, I still think that having these customized changes, balances, like tailor-made to the hero in order to shore up the deficiencies in that character that are inherent in the game's design that's been there for the last 5 years, I think that's a good idea. I think Scorpio Thieves need some specialized, love and care in order to make them be meta-relevant characters without just relying on absolutely insane RNG mechanics like having built-in dodge. I think that's a thing that should happen. If you take a look at a character like Mediator Queric, he was a total flop on release, but it's because his design was to be a warrior with effect resistance that was meant to actually cleanse the team. He was designed to be a cleanser in the warrior class. That's what they wanted him to do. That's what gave him his identity, is that he has a support on a class that typically doesn't have it. And unfortunately, the actual constellations for warrior, nothing they could have really gave him would help him do the job. And they designed the kit in such a way that they thought it might work out with the imprint, him being ER to start with, but clearly that wasn't enough. And when it came time to balance the character, well, what are you going to do? You could just give him like 150% effect resistance up front, or you could just do the solution they went with, which was temporarily make him immune to debuffs, so that way he could do his job as a cleanser. Obviously, they went with the latter, and we've been dealing with those repercussions for the last like 1.5 to 2 years. But if they had went with the former, it potentially looks bad because you're acknowledging that the ER system and the constellation system inherently in the game isn't good. And if it still doesn't work out, if he still can't do his job, well, then you just have to ask yourself, then what was the point of even buffing the character? So again, we have those two spectrums, those two examples I'm talking about here, where it's just like the system holds characters back, and the way that they try to fix it, the deficiencies in the system currently clearly could have long-lasting implications on the game if it's not handled properly. Yes, obviously a new Awakened system like this one could have those same ramifications if not handled properly. But because of the fact that they have, if done correctly, more ways to broadly apply things like passives or like multiple passive components, slight stat tweaks that are specialized to the character, hopefully you don't get those kinds of situations like with Hand Guy. But yeah, overall, those are my thoughts on the Awakened Potential system and me covering its cancellation. What did you all think while I was gone about the system? Did you actually somehow like it? What were your major hang-ups for it? Do you think the whole thing should have been scrapped? What do you think could have been saved? I would, as always, love to hear any and all comments from you guys down below. If you enjoyed the video, as always, like it, subscribe it, would help me out here a ton. Enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and I'll catch y'all in the next one. Bye bye now.